The slap echoed through the airport. Cameras flashed. The billionaire smirked, until someone whispered the truth. The woman he'd just hit was no ordinary passenger. Within hours, his $2.5 billion empire would start collapsing. But how could one stranger at an airport destroy a man the world thought was untouchable? The slap echoed through the airport terminal, sharp, humiliating, final. Gasps rippled through the crowd as a tall black woman in a navy travel suit stumbled backward, one hand pressed against her cheek. The terminal froze. Even the flight announcements seemed to hold their breath. And then came the voice, arrogant, venomous, unmistakably powerful. "Maybe next time," the man snarled, "you'll think twice before standing in my way." He turned, fixing his cufflinks like nothing had happened, while security guards rushed forward, phones raised all around, cameras clicking, recording. The man was Richard Callaway, a billionaire venture capitalist, global investor, and the kind of man whose name made governments bow and markets move. He was used to being untouchable. Until today. Because the woman he just slapped, the one everyone thought was just another passenger, wasn't who she appeared to be. And before the next boarding call echoed through the terminal, Richard Callaway's empire, his companies, his contracts, his reputation, would begin to crumble. All because of her. She stood slowly, adjusting her jacket, eyes calm but burning. The crowd parted around her as she locked eyes with him. "You've just made the most expensive mistake of your life," she said softly. Then she walked away, leaving the billionaire, the cameras, and the entire world seconds away from a scandal that would erase $2.5 billion before he even boarded his flight. If you saw someone in power humiliate a stranger in public, would you step in or stay silent? Thank you for sticking around with me, my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Long before the slap, Richard Callaway believed the world owed him reverence. The tabloids called him the man who never lost. He'd built his empire from venture capital and tech acquisitions, ruthless takeovers, cold boardroom deals, and strategic charm that made him look like a genius. He wasn't. He was a gambler with a god complex. And when he won, he made sure everyone watched him win. He traveled by private jet, barked orders at assistants, and treated the world like a chessboard he owned. People didn't tell him, no. Not once in 15 years. Until the morning of his flight to Zurich. At the same time, halfway across town, Dr. Amara Lewis was packing a worn brown leather satchel. She wasn't famous. She didn't live for headlines. But the irony was, she'd shaped the lives of millions without ever standing in front of a camera. Amara was a linguist and a humanitarian lawyer who specialized in international ethics compliance, the quiet, unseen machinery that decided which companies were allowed to do business in developing nations. In other words, she was the kind of woman who could erase a billionaire's access to global markets with a single signed letter. And she had just signed one. For Richard Callaway's company. She didn't hate him personally, at least, not before that day. But she'd seen the damage his investments had caused. Displaced villages in Ghana, illegal land deals in Kenya, manipulation of trade agreements that left farmers starving. Her job wasn't to take revenge. It was to enforce accountability. And she did it with precision, calm, quiet, factual. Still, when she boarded that flight, she wasn't thinking about him at all. She just wanted to get home to her mother in London. Meanwhile, in the VIP terminal across the airport, Richard was livid. His team had informed him, just hours earlier, that his company's approval for a massive $2.5 billion joint venture had been suspended due to pending ethical review. No one could tell him why, or who had signed the notice. He was used to firing people for less. He was used to fixing everything. But this was different. Because the signature on that suspension notice, though he didn't know it yet, belonged to the same woman he'd soon insult, in front of the entire world. By the time their paths crossed, fate had already set the trap. The terminal was crowded, tension buzzing in the air. Two lives, one built on arrogance, one built on justice, were about to collide. Do you believe karma always finds those who abuse their power? Or do some people really get away with it? Drop your thoughts below. The line at gate 17 was long, but Amara didn't mind. Her headphones were in, her coffee was warm, and her boarding pass glowed softly on her phone screen. Across the terminal, a small entourage cut through security like a royal procession. Photographers, assistants, bodyguards. At the center of it, Richard Calloway, gray suit, perfect hair, an aura of entitlement so thick it made people part like water. He hated waiting. He hated queues. And most of all, he hated being told no. When he reached the gate, his assistant whispered, "Sir, they said boarding hasn't begun for first class yet." Richard didn't even look at her. "Then tell them to start." The attendant smiled nervously. "I'm sorry, sir, but we're still." "Do you know who I am?" Heads turned. The air tightened. Amara glanced up, briefly, removing one headphone. She saw the man, tall, commanding, impatient. She'd seen 1,000 men like him in corporate hearings, at trade summits, in press photos where they smiled while ruining lives. She looked away. When boarding finally opened, passengers began moving forward in order: first class, business, economy. Amara, who'd been bumped up to business for her humanitarian status, stepped forward calmly with her passport in hand. That's when Richard's shoulder clipped hers. Her coffee spilled across the floor. "Watch where you're going," he snapped, not even glancing back. She blinked. "Excuse me?" He turned, visibly annoyed. "Are you deaf or just slow?" Gasps echoed around them. A few phones lifted, recording. Amara's voice stayed even. "You bumped into me, sir." He laughed, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, come on. Don't play the victim. You people always." That's when he said it. A phrase so ugly, so loaded with history and hate, that the entire terminal went silent. And then came the slap. It wasn't rage that drove her to respond. It was disbelief. A billionaire had just humiliated her. In public, on camera, unprovoked. The sound echoed like a crack of thunder. People gasped. Someone yelled, "Did he just hit her?" Security ran forward. And as they did, Amara stood straight, eyes locked on him, voice clear and deadly calm. "You've just made the most expensive mistake of your life." She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Because within seconds, videos were already flooding social media. And within minutes, her name, Dr. Amara Lewis, would be trending worldwide. By the time Richard boarded his jet, smug and unbothered, he had no idea that the woman he'd just humiliated was the same person who'd frozen his $2.5 billion merger less than 24 hours earlier. No idea that she held the legal authority to blacklist his companies across Europe. No idea that his empire was already burning, and this video was about to pour gasoline. Have you ever seen someone's arrogance destroy everything they built? Did they deserve what came next? Comment your thoughts. By the time Richard's jet touched down in Zurich, his phone was a battlefield of notifications. Hashtag billionaire slap. Hashtag justice for Amara. Hashtag cancel Calloway. He stared at the screen, jaw tight, trying to convince himself it would blow over. It always did. A PR statement. A donation. A distraction. Money erased everything. But this time, money was the story. Inside the terminal, hundreds of miles away, airport security replayed the footage. It was undeniable, one slap, captured from 5 different angles. Every major network requested the clip. Every headline screamed the same thing. Untouchable billionaire assaults woman in public. The twist came when the victim's name surfaced. Dr. Amara Lewis, International Ethics Advisor for Global Trade Commission. The world gasped. She wasn't just a random passenger. She was the official whose signature had suspended Calloway's billion-dollar merger. Suddenly, the story wasn't about temper, it was about justice. In London, Amara's phone buzzed nonstop. Friends, journalists, colleagues. Her inbox flooded with messages from women she'd never met. "Thank you for standing up." She hadn't planned to become a symbol. She just wanted accountability. Still, she felt uneasy. Viral fame was its own kind of prison. Meanwhile, in a glass tower in Zurich, panic spread like smoke. Richard's CFO burst into the conference room. "We've lost the Zurich partners. They're pulling out." "What?" Richard barked. "They said it's a reputational risk." The African consortium followed. The UN panel froze the entire deal. The number hit like a punch, $2.5 billion gone. One slap. One woman. One moment. And everything he built began to collapse. Still, Richard refused to believe she'd had the power to do this. He told himself it was coincidence. He told himself she'd get hers. But as he scrolled through the news feed, he saw her face on every screen, composed, articulate, explaining the deeper truth behind corporate abuse and accountability. The same calm voice that had warned him in the terminal. He felt something he hadn't in years. Late that night, he poured a drink and watched the viral interview again. "Power," Amara said on camera, "means nothing when it harms others. Integrity is the only real currency." Her words hit harder than the slap ever could. Have you ever watched karma move faster than anyone expected? Tell me in the comments. Do you think public humiliation is fair justice, or too far? For 3 days, Richard Calloway disappeared from the public eye. No statements. No apology. Just silence. His PR team begged him to show contrition. His lawyers drafted settlements. But Richard wasn't thinking about money anymore. He was thinking about her. He couldn't stop seeing her face on that screen, calm, unbroken, terrifyingly composed. So he did what powerful men do when their control slips. He looked for leverage. "Dig up everything," he told his private investigator. "Who she is. Who funds her. Who she's connected to." The man nodded and vanished into the noise of the scandal. By midnight, he returned, holding a thin folder. Richard opened it and froze. Inside was a single photo. It wasn't Amara in a courtroom. It was Amara, in a refugee camp, surrounded by children, dirt-streaked, barefoot, smiling. The caption: Dr. Amara Lewis, survivor of the 2014 Kinshasa airstrike. Lost her husband and son. Later founded the Global Integrity Network. The next page showed something else. Richard's name. His company's logo. And a corporate contract dated that same year, detailing the weapons logistics that made the airstrike possible. His company had funded the operation. He'd destroyed her life long before that slap. Richard's hand shook. This can't be right. But it was. Every document, every payment, every signed deal pointed back to him. He had no idea who she was when he hit her. But fate clearly did. Across the ocean, Amara sat in her London flat, the lights low. Her assistant read the latest headlines. He's blaming his board. Claims he didn't know about the contracts. Amara stared out the window. I don't care what he says. I care what he does. Her voice trembled, not from anger, from exhaustion. People think this is about a slap, she whispered. It's not. It's about everything before it. In Zurich, Richard stared at the photo again. The same woman he'd dismissed at the airport was the one whose pain his empire had built itself on. The one who had suffered for his success. The one who, somehow, had found the strength to face him and stay calm. He poured another drink. But for the first time in his life, it didn't taste like power. It tasted like guilt. If you found out you had unknowingly ruined someone's life, would you confess or cover it up? Tell me honestly in the comments. Rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Zurich penthouse. Richard sat alone, surrounded by silence. No calls, no assistants, no bodyguards. Just the hollow echo of his empire collapsing piece by piece. Every major investor had withdrawn. 3 lawsuits were pending. His name, once synonymous with success, now trended alongside the words assault, corruption, and blood money. The board voted to remove him. His own father refused to speak to him. He had become what he feared most, irrelevant. On the opposite side of the world, Amara was sitting in a small community center in Nairobi. It wasn't part of her job. It was homecoming. She hadn't planned to return, but something inside her needed to stand on the same soil she'd once fled. The camp she'd helped rebuild still stood, smaller, quieter now. Children played in the red dust, laughter echoing against rusted tin roofs. An old woman recognized her. "Dr. Amara," she said softly, You look tired. I am, Amara admitted. She smiled faintly. The world made you their symbol, didn't it? Amara exhaled. I didn't want that. The woman's wrinkled hand touched hers. Symbols don't get to choose. They just have to shine. That night, Amara sat beneath a broken streetlight, writing a statement for her organization's next summit. She paused over every word. She wasn't writing to punish. She was writing to teach. Her phone buzzed. A known number. She almost ignored it, until she saw the name in the preview. Richard Calloway. She hesitated, then answered. Dr. Lewis, his voice rasped. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need to say it out loud. She didn't speak. I didn't know. About the contracts. About your family. I thought I was just another man playing the game. Amara's voice stayed level. And how many lives did that game cost? He was silent for a long time. Too many, he whispered. I can't fix the past. But if there's any way to make it right. You can start, she said, by listening. For the first time, the man who had silenced the world fell completely quiet. And for the first time, Amara felt the smallest flicker of peace, not because she forgave him yet, but because she'd finally been heard. When someone truly wrongs you, is justice enough? Or does healing demand that they understand the pain they caused? Comment what you believe. Weeks passed. The world had moved on to its next outrage, but Richard Calloway's name still sat in the ashes of his empire. He sold his penthouse. He fired his PR team. He vanished from social media. And for the first time in 20 years, he was alone, with nothing left to prove. He spent days rereading Amara's interviews, her essays, her speeches. He began to see something he had never recognized before. That power wasn't just money, it was the ability to do good without needing applause. He found her again weeks later, not through lawyers or lobbyists, but through the Global Integrity Network, her organization. He didn't go as a billionaire. He went as a volunteer. The camp in Nairobi had expanded, new classrooms, solar panels, a medical tent built from repurposed steel. Amara was there, in the dust, sleeves rolled up, handing out notebooks to children. When she saw him walking toward her, she froze. The crowd parted. Dr. Lewis, he said softly, lowering his head. I came to work, not to talk. At first, no one believed it. The disgraced billionaire, stacking supplies in the heat, sharing meals with volunteers, taking orders from the same woman he'd humiliated. He said little. He listened a lot. He learned their names, their languages, their stories. And slowly, something in him cracked open. Humility. One evening, as the sun dipped over the horizon, Amara found him repairing a broken water pipe. Why are you really here? She asked. He looked up, sweat and dust streaking his face. Because I can't live with who I was, he said. But maybe I can rebuild what I destroyed. She studied him, searching for the arrogance, the mask, the performance. It wasn't there. For the first time, she saw a man, not a monster. In the following days, he used what he had left, influence, connections, money, not for himself, but for them. He liquidated a portion of his remaining assets to fund 3 new schools across the region, under Amara's supervision, with no publicity attached. The press tried to chase the story, but he refused interviews. He wasn't interested in saving his image. He was interested in saving souls. One night, Amara sat under the same broken streetlight, watching the children play in the distance. He approached quietly. I used to think power was control, he said. But it's just stewardship, isn't it? She smiled faintly. Power's what you do when no one's watching. They stood in silence, 2 people bound by the same scar, but finally moving toward light. Do you believe true change is possible for people who've done terrible things? Or are some mistakes too big to redeem? Share your truth below. The night was humid in Geneva, the air alive with flashes of cameras and the low hum of reporters. It was the Global Ethics Forum, an event that gathered the most influential business leaders and humanitarian advocates in the world. It was also the same stage Richard Calloway once dominated, the one that had crowned him Businessman of the Year. He hadn't been invited. He asked to come. And when Amara saw his name appear in the speaker lineup, she froze. He was walking straight into the same spotlight that had burned him down. When he took the stage, the audience murmured. Half recognized him with disgust, the other half with disbelief. He didn't wear a $1,000 suit anymore. Just a plain gray jacket and a white shirt. He stood at the microphone for a moment, silent, before he spoke. "A few months ago," he began, "I believed wealth could buy me anything, power, respect, even forgiveness." The audience stilled. "I was wrong. Money can buy silence, but not peace. And when I lost everything, I learned what real poverty feels like, moral poverty." He took a deep breath. "I hit a woman in public. But before that, I spent years hitting the world. With greed, with carelessness, with arrogance. The woman I hurt that day was someone my company had already hurt once before. And she still chose to stand for justice, not vengeance." He paused, then turned toward the side of the stage. "Dr. Lewis, if you're here, I owe you the world's apology, not just my own." The camera panned. Amara sat in the front row, calm, unreadable. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then slowly she rose. The crowd fell into stunned silence as she walked up beside him. Richard stepped back, giving her the microphone. "When someone breaks something precious," she said softly, "they can't always fix it. But they can choose what they build next." Her gaze found his. He didn't come here for pity. He came to prove that even the powerful can kneel. And that matters. The crowd began to applaud, soft at first, then growing into thunder. For the first time, the two of them stood side by side, not as victim and villain, but as two people who had both been changed by truth. When the speech went viral, the world expected scandal. Instead, they saw a story of reconciliation. The clip titled, "The Slap That Changed Everything, From Violence to Redemption." Governments reinstated Amara's commission. Her foundation tripled in funding. And Richard? He donated the last of his assets to the Global Integrity Network, walking away with nothing but a promise. To keep listening. After the lights dimmed, Amara found him backstage. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I did," he replied quietly. "I started this in arrogance. I needed to end it in truth." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe there's hope for you yet. What's more powerful, punishment or redemption? If you were in her place, would you forgive him? Let's talk in the comments." Months later, the noise had faded. The hashtags stopped trending. What remained were people, changed, quieter, better. Richard Calloway lived in a one-bedroom flat overlooking the Thames. He took the tube, carried his own groceries, and spent most mornings volunteering at a legal aid clinic funded by the foundation he had once ignored. He didn't talk about the billions he lost, he talked about the people he'd met. He wrote letters to every family affected by his company's old contracts. Most never replied. He didn't blame them. Some wounds were too deep for words. But each envelope he sealed felt like another stone lifted from his chest. Amara's life had become a whirlwind of rebuilding. Her organization expanded to 15 countries. She trained young lawyers, many from the same communities once harmed by those corporate deals. Yet her greatest joy wasn't in the headlines or the awards, it was in seeing people who had once been silent find their voices. One afternoon, she received a small brown parcel with no return address. Inside was a single object, a brass key, engraved with a quote. "Integrity is the only real currency." Beneath it, a note. "Thank you for teaching me what wealth really means. R.C." She smiled, not because he had changed, but because she had too. Forgiveness was never surrender. It was release. A year later, they met again, by chance, at an airport cafe in London. The same kind of place where everything had fallen apart. No cameras. No entourage. He noticed her first. She was reading, headphones in, peaceful. He hesitated, then walked over. "Dr. Lewis." She looked up, a flicker of surprise, then a smile. "Mr. Calloway." He gestured to the empty seat. "May I?" She nodded. They didn't talk about the slap, or the scandal, or the billions. They talked about books, about the camp in Nairobi, about hope. When the boarding call sounded, they stood. "Safe travels," she said. "And to you." For a brief moment, their eyes met, not as adversaries, not as symbols, but as two people who had faced the worst in each other and chosen light instead of darkness. They walked to separate gates, two stories that had once collided, now moving forward in quiet grace. As the screen faded to black, Amara's final narration echoed. Power is temporary. Humanity is eternal. Sometimes, the universe doesn't punish to destroy, it punishes to awaken. Do you believe people can truly change if they lose everything? Or do they only change when they finally see what matters? Share your thoughts below. Your voice might awaken someone today. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.